right, peace, everyone. We are live. And once again, we have Tim Osman. This is the second time we have Tim Osman on the Bach Precision channel. Uh, he's a wonderful, wonderful guest. I've been a long time subscriber to uh, to his show, and he hosts Infinite Plane Radio. He's an author. He's written a lot of works. Some of them include the Metascript Decoded, the Auto Hoaxer Handbook, Deep Faked, Guardrails, The Power of ME, Mandela Effect Magic. Am I missing any publications from your end, Tim? Oops, sorry. You're muted. Let me unmute your mic. Your mic is muted, Tim. Yeah, I think it's muted from your end. There we go. I think
Okay,
you're good.
I guess you had to do it. The only book I think of that you didn't mention is Secret Religion of the Elite.
The Secret Religion of the Elite. Okay. And what Tim is good at is deconstructing their media fakeries, right? So this is, I think, his expertise. But you judge for yourself. Go check him out. I pinned his main channel. He has a bunch of channels on YouTube. Some of them were gone for a while, right, Tim? And then you just got them reinstated. I remember that happening about a week or two ago. And but the main channel where he broadcasts from and live streams from is pinned. And without further ado, let me just go straight into the questions. My first question for you, Tim, is what predictions or expectations do you have for 2025? How do you see them unfolding? And Trump's presidency in particular, if you had to predict one major revelation or narrative shift that will define 2025, what would that be? Oh, Tim left. Let me let's just wait until Tim fixes his okay.
It seems like we dropped out. I think we should be fine now.
Yeah, your audio is perfect now.
Okay, much better. I don't know what that was, some gremlin. Now I got your
You want me to? Okay, good.
I got your question. And when I make predictions, I use the word in quotes. It's based upon my presupposition that all of the mainstream entertainment has been co-opted for the purposes of essentially brainwashing and conditioning us for fake news. So based on that, I look at what's been recently projected into the mainstream entertainment of all media, and I make predictions based on it. And this has been pretty effective. So for 2025, I think this is the year we get Oppenheimered. I think this is the year that America gets a nuke, likely in Seattle, but it could be New York.
This is you think you base this on predictive programming they've used in their movies, and like how did you get to this conclusion?
Okay, with this one, for one thing, we've been seeing a buildup with movies like Oppenheimer and then the series Fallout by the director's brother. And it goes even further back. If you look at Dark Knight Rising, Christopher Nolan, there's a scene which seems to foreshadow a mushroom cloud. And I think he indicates 2025 because the scene seems to reference 2020. And then he says, count down to 5 and throw the smoke bomb. And the smoke bomb creates this mushroom cloud, which had me looking at 2025 as the year that it gets delivered. And the same director, Christopher Nolan, did Oppenheimer. So now the public has been recently hit mentally with the nuke. We've had this big movie, IMAX theater, we've all seen it. So it exists on the world stage as a prop, ready to deploy. And I've been following this story, but then recently there was this trailer that came out for a movie called The Homestead about Los Angeles getting nuked. So at the end of the year, I said to everyone, hey, based on this, look for the nuke to happen in Los Angeles or something to that effect. And if you look, what happened in Los Angeles, it has been compared to that, at least in the narrative structure. And they canceled Fallout 2, which was to go into production. So I'm suggesting here that we're getting ready for the big one, programming and the influence, well, not the influence, the relationship between the entertainment and what they're about to do to us.
And what is your take on the California fires and the connection they have to the actor Steven Gutenberg?
And I think I should also add.
Go ahead, Tim.
Sorry, we got a little robot voice there. Go ahead and ask again.
Yeah, I was asking you about the LA fires and connection to Steven Gutenberg. There's predictive programming.
Okay.
Movie.
Well, when the fires happened.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm listening, Tim.
Steven Gutenberg is the actor who became the instant face. He was trending. He was the face of the LA fires, where all of a sudden this Hollywood actor is out there supposedly saving lives, helping the fire department and moving cars. So he became this hero. I kind of didn't know much about him. I knew some of his movies, but then immediately after, some Angeles being Angeles. But it was just kind of funny because it's like life imitates art. When I saw that, I started to look at this thinking, okay, they're shaping a narrative here. There's little clues. It's probably fake because real events don't have big celebrity. But the celebrity angle made me think, okay, this is probably a narrative and a story, and it ties into the homestead. And again, after the fires, you had people like Trump and Jay Leno comparing it to Hiroshima specifically. And they said this next fire is going to go nuclear. So they throw these buzzwords out there on purpose because they're painting a picture. So it may as well have been nuked. And they're going to say it got nuked by climate change. So the metaphor is what drives the narrative.
Right. Now, I'm just jumping from topic to topic because it's been quite a few months since we last talked. So there's been so many things that we can cover, and I'm just trying to squeeze as many as I can. So, Mike, in your discussions about Luigi Mangione, right? You've questioned the authenticity of certain public figures like that. Now, how do you determine the line between genuine individuals and potential fictional constructs in media? And I guess this can also go and include like historical figures too.
Yeah, that's a good question. When it comes to someone like Luigi, my first take on this event was it's just a murder. And if there's any indication it's a psyop, it's going to be revealed in the next couple of days in the forms of narratives and predictive programming. And I was inclined to think it was a nothing burger at first because it wasn't that big of a story. It didn't seem. But then I had just finished watching The Madness, the #1 show on Netflix. And that show is about this CEO who gets whacked and the neighborhood protects the shooter. They're protecting the alleged assassin because they agree with the guy. And he had a 3D print, does 3D printed guns. The billionaire in The Madness is based on Elon Musk, and he's financing Nazis on the internet, and he steals the election. So the whole movie, The Madness, the whole series, relates to post-Trump victory America. And other writers have noticed this. They said that Netflix has a crystal ball. But looking at that, I thought, okay, what I just saw on Netflix just happened on the streets. So it's probably fake. And one of the central narratives was working class versus the elite. The elite are oppressing the poor. And that
Mm,
story was attached to this Luigi story, shooting the CEO and becoming a hero because of it. And our group in Gilded, we're looking at the symbolism, and it's like Robin Hood steals from the rich, gives to the poor. He's wearing a hood. The women love him. So he's turned into a hero, like he's force memed into being this popular character, even though he's a murderer. He's compared to movie stars like Dave Franco. People are begging Dave Franco to play this guy in a movie. So the more the story piled up, the more I realized, okay, this is scripted. We have a manifesto written on the bullets. So it just seemed to have more agenda than reality. And the more we looked, the more it became apparent here that this was all just a big fictional construct. And there was a Luigi lookalike contest where a bunch of people put on the hoodie and they tried to look like the guy. And this is just like the movie The Joker, where he shoots the rich guys, he becomes a hero, everybody puts on a Joker mask, and it's the kill the rich movement. So
right.
I just said Luigi is a construct. He's an actor playing a role that was pre-sold to the masses in the form of the Joker, a class warrior with a grievance against the rich. So I look at when somebody emerges in a story, if they have all kinds of relationships to what's happening in the media right at that moment in the entertainment, like they stepped out of a movie screen, I just have to start with the premise that it's probably fake. The person probably doesn't exist. So Luigi's a real person. However, he is a actor. And if you looked at all the photography, all the shots, the perp walks, they made him look like Lee Harvey Oswald. They made him look like the
Exactly.
Joker in the back of
Yeah.
the cab. So he's a construct, is what I'm saying. He's a mass media construct.
Like straight from casting, central casting, and you mentioned Elon Musk. Elon Musk is a straight up actor too, and everything he does is a calculated act. Like the whole Sig Heil Nazi salute, that was calculated, and then denying it was also calculated. In my opinion, what's your take on that? And the whole role he's playing, the tech oligarch guru.
Yeah, no doubt. I would say that the timing of that salute definitely scripted, and I think
Mhm.
it relates to that recent shooter, Henderson Solomon. He's
Yeah.
the black white supremacist who shot somebody, and he's doing the Nazi salute as well. And he was inspired, he says, by Candace Owens, Nick Fuentes, and by Kanye West. Three people associated with X and Musk, and the idea that Elon Musk has opened the door to the madness, which is what the Netflix show is about. The madness refers to the mind viruses that trigger right-wing violence. So the timing of that shooter, its connection to Musk, no, none of this is coincidental. This is world stage theater, 100%. And Musk is 100% an actor. He's
Mm.
he's been caught faking video game prowess. He pays people to get him very high up.
I remember. Yeah, I remember.
So it's like, well, wait till they find out what he's doing with outer space. When they find out how much of that is fabrication, CGI. But he's a very calculated character. He's a combination of a number of characters. I'd say he's Werner von Braun's the Elon who colonizes Mars. He's part Willy Wonka. He's part Iron Man, part Nikola Tesla, Henry Ford. So he's a combination. In other words, he's a front man. His character
Did,
is a Frankenstein.
didn't Von Braun write a fiction book with a character named Elon who goes to Mars or has something to do with Mars? Or am I imagining this? Uh, but it's just
Yes,
more evidence that this is just a construct, and he's just like a casting, someone who's just cast to play a role.
absolutely. And it's an interesting role when you analyze it. And yeah, it was called Mars, A
Mars,
Technical Tale by Werner von Braun. And the Elon is the first dictator. And I think Elon does these things that look like random, but they're not. For example, when he bought Twitter, he put the big shining X on it and they made him turn it off because it was too bright. And
right?
I believe that is meant to be a historic analog to Constantine having a vision of a glowing cross. Like I think that we have these various characters that are superimposed onto these big world stage individuals like Musk, these world stage theater movie stars. And I think his consolidation of social media through X is part of a bigger agenda. And I think it ties into the empire closing its system against information that contradicts it or undermines it. I think he's part of the censorship agenda, is what I'm saying. Pretending to
Right.
be the champion of free speech, he's providing the pretext that we need to shut it down. That's his whole agenda. And that last shooter, he said that he's a product of media, entertainment, Kanye West, and the internet.
Basically condemning all these people who he claims influence him. He's saying, you turned me into a shooter."
Yeah, exactly. And this was his own manifesto, which is kind of funny because it's obviously what they want the public to take away from the story. And you're never going to hear it from him because he's dead, not to mention a minor. So conveniently, they have these manifestos that anybody can read. And we're supposed to believe this stuff. And this one's so funny. They said that I'm talking about Henderson Solomon, that he was in touch over the internet with another school shooter, Natalie Rupno. And
Right.
anyway, fictional characters in a fictional universe.
Lynn says he's a product of government programming. So, like, wait, what? You mean like schools and why is
What
post
she
tech
thinks,
computer month?
the general perception is that these are individuals who really did the bad thing. And I'm saying, no, he's an actor. I would
Right.
argue here that there are no patsies on the world stage. There are no mass shooters on the world stage. These are all actors. And that you're supposed to say, oh, look, this reflects on society. We must change. They want you to react to it as though it's real. I won't react to it as though it's real because it's not real. It doesn't say anything about society. It's a piece of an engineered worldview. I mean, and that's one of my main points lately has been that the purpose of fake news is how the power elite write history day by day, and they have total creative control.
Hey, Tim, I have a lot of listeners who have never, even conceptualized any of this. So could you explain the Metascript concept that
Yes.
you've come up? Yeah, please.
Okay, so we can all agree that some events are fake. If that's our starting point, let's just say it's a mall shooting, and we determine it's been faked. Well, if it's been faked, who's involved? Well, one, it's not just actors. It's actors, directors, it's Department of Homeland Security, it's politicians, it's the police departments, it's the fire departments, it's the coroners. It's a big conspiracy, even if it's a small psyop. When you look at these things, these are interlocking networks of departments that have to function as a unit. So these are big events, even if they just look like a minor blip on the radar, just another fake shooting. No, it's not just another fake shooting. But if you can accept that, then you have to agree with the premise that at a minimum, they can introduce entire scenes into our history. So now that's in the history book. That happened. And scene by scene, they insert fake events that become our historic narrative. Additionally, these events drive the mainstream narrative. So even if they're reporting real news, they're reporting on or they're reporting within the parameters established by these big noisy events. So my point being, the cumulative effect of hundreds of psyops a month, thousands of psyops a year, we're talking about non-contested lies that get put in our history books. Well, our history is obviously warped. Our history is easily 33% fake, if not more. And it represents a selective bias. So what I'm saying is that this is not accidental. They're not making it up as they go. They have like a 50-year plan. Like, oh, in 2030, this is how bad climate change is going to be. In 2040, we'll be on Mars. In 2050, so they have these agendas that they pretty much are able to write a history that aligns with it, and they act it out on the world stage. And what I'm pointing out here is that fakery is the rule, not the exception.
Excuse me.
It's a complete inversion of what most people think. Like most stuff is real, but some things are faked. No. These big transformative psyops are how they write history. And so what I call the metascript is the big story that guides it, that connects everything. And one of the main things that they do is they've synchronized all of the entertainment with all of the news.
Right.
And it all serves the same purpose. And when we see predictive programming, that is evidence of the synchronization of the entertainment and the news propaganda. And there's a lot of misinformation and I think shills who try to hide the fact that we're looking at government co-opted entertainment. And they try to cover it up with ridiculous notions about how everything's a simulation. And that's why they have these coincidences. And what we've discovered by our analysis consistently over the years and its predictability is that no, this is actually the deliberate synchronization between entertainment and news that they're going to fabricate. It's so integrated that it's like people don't have any way to explain it other than what a bunch of weird coincidences. And I have endless examples of this phenomenon.
You want to give a few examples?
Sure. I mean, for example, this Luigi thing we were just talking about, there was an article which just came out that I was citing the other day, and they said that Netflix had a crystal ball. And I think that's funny because let's say, for example, the day before Trump launches his campaign in Waco, Netflix releases Waco, American Apocalypse. And it has all kinds of connections, of course, to right-wing politics and Trump. And then another example, and I'm talking about things that align perfectly to influence perceptions. There's the release of the new Game of Thrones. It was like Game of Thrones on HBO's coming out and House of the Dragon. And just as House of the Dragon's coming out, Roe v. Wade has this, there's a leak. Roe v. Wade gets overturned. So women are marching because they're going to lose bodily autonomy and they have this nightmare version of what's going to happen. Well, I look at Game of Thrones and the opening scene is the queen dying because she's not allowed to abort the child that would kill her. And they decided they needed the child because, of course, she's the most powerful woman in the country, but she's still just a broodmare for the state. Out and she dies. So this is like a nightmare scenario engineered to of Roe v. Wade. And the timing of this also suggests that the leak was going to happen anyway. It wasn't a real leak. So I'm just showing how there's a synchronization between politics and entertainment at all times. And I can predict it by looking at what's the top movie right now. The Trump head wound thing on July 13th, we have no less than 30 different examples of movies that came out. Yeah. And it had a season finale a few days after the Trump head wound. And in it, the character Rupert Thorne, a Trump-like character, gets his ear wounded. You know, we have these instances where it looks like a bunch of coincidences. But what we realize what's happening here is this is synchronized, concerted messaging on an almost unimaginable scale to people who don't know that everything has been co-opted. The conspiracy is so big, a lot of people can't see it.
It's like ever present or omnipresent almost. Like it's just not one medium that they use. They use anything and everything they can to like pepper in messages and predictive programming and I've seen many examples of that. And things like games and not just movies or like Netflix shows, but
sure. I have an example. Earlier last summer, there was this video game that came out called Black Myth about the Monkey King and, you know, Ozman, this monkey god, where 10 million people are playing this game simultaneously, and it broke a huge record. All these people are simultaneously playing the role of this monkey god. At the exact same time, there was a 90-foot tall statue of this monkey god erected in Houston, and it had protesters. And then I realized at the same time, there were a number of like HBO, Chimp Crazy. There were chimps that were running loose in Ohio. And I was like, why is it that everywhere I look, it seems like there's a lot of attention being driven to this ape meme, a violent ape, or this monkey god. And then there's this movie that had just come out that we were discussing, and it was called Monkey Man, about a boxer who wears the Monkey King's face as a mask. So I'm just pointing out here that it hits millions of minds in a very synchronized way. And it's all about the synchronization. That was also right after Bad Monkey came out on Apple, and the WHO declared the monkeypox a global threat. So you have monkeypox bad monkey, 90-foot tall statue, millions of people plugged in. And I'm like, okay, what is going on here? And even more blatant examples. On 10/7, Israel's attacked. Well, on 10/6, Modern Warfare 3 comes out. So you have millions of people playing a video game, a simulation of a war, and then it happens the next day. So I think part of this is putting things in your frame of reference to color your perception of the fake news event to come. I think a lot of it is just, in other words, like post-hypnotic suggestion. There's a clip in a movie called Focus. If you haven't seen it, Focus is a movie about con men. This con man played by Will Smith, and they're trying to get this individual that they're gambling with to choose the number 55. To get him to do it, they spend half the day with him, and they plant it everywhere. So it's in his subconscious. It's on the shirt the guy's wearing, or they go on 55th Street. They have this song playing where they have the number. He's hearing it repeated in his head. And it's this whole sequence where they're describing how over the course of the day, they had subjected him to so much peripheral subconscious influence that were going to direct him to this conclusion that they knew he was going to pick that particular number when they were gambling. And I think that's happening to us all the time with themes, with archetypes, and of course symbols. But it's immersive, and no, it never ends. The psyop entertainment complex is the perpetual war, and it's just a mind war. They never relent. Notice 1 minute it's the shooter who killed the CEO, then it's the drones, then it's the fog. It's like every week there's another psyop. Then it's the fires in Los Angeles. Then some celebrity has a thing happen. The public is always being diverted from one thing to the next, and they never get enough time to really fully deal with what they were just fooled with.
How long have you, Tim? How long do you think they've been this omnipresent? Like, do you think 200 years ago, the town crier, back when they were just handing out street newspapers, do you think he was controlled and following Metascripts? And prior to that, the scribes writing on cuneiform or papyrus or whatever, they were part of the control mechanism. Like, how long have this been going on in our existence, do you think?
Well, it's interesting to think about how literacy, has always been prohibited to the lower classes. There's always been a knowledge disparity. And when I say
Right.
the elite, we're talking about people who have an advantage position, and it's by design. It's meant to maintain a system. And I think that what we're seeing with media is something that religions have always done. And we're just seeing it perfected. And so I would consider mass media to be the one world religion. And it's because we all have the same frame of reference, and they control it. And that frame of reference is inherently fallacious, and it's full of God constructs, things that don't exist. And the atheists are its most fervent believers. They're very religious. It's the atheists who believe in angels, who believe in floods from Gaia, who believe in this heaven that we call outer space and all of its fantasies. So I would say that this has been going on. This science of mass mind control has been going on since the advent of religion and the installation of priesthoods who've always served the power elite with the backing of force. So I think it's an ancient technology. We're just looking at its most recent iteration.
Right. I wanted to ask you about John McAfee's alleged return to social media and claims about faking his death. Do you think the quote unquote dead celebrity coming back as a psyop is going to be a thing? Like, who else do you suspect is gonna make a return?
Yeah, the only reason why that one seems plausible is that he has faked his death before. He had been involved in fakery. The QAnon group believed that he was going to release information about the elite because he had hacked all the computers. None of it ever came true. And his most recent reappearance on Twitter seems to be a push for crypto, some kind of a meme coin. So when it goes down to it, though, I have been looking at all these like alleged fake deaths. People have come back, and it's certainly plausible that somebody could have multiple roles. But as time goes on, I'm like, there's no way Elvis is coming back. There's no way JFK Jr. is coming back, or JFK. They're getting too old. But
Mm,
there have been many rappers that I've looked at whose deaths seem to be industry stunts. hoaxes. And I don't know if these hoaxes are um, separate from the bigger psyop entertainment complex, especially when you look at some of these characters and their associations. So I think the death fakery is no more mystical or unexplainable than just crisis actors dying. But they do these things. They do these various influence operations. They create martyrs all the time. The whole BLM movement is based on martyrs, and it's a routine psyop. It always has the same hallmarks, the same symbolism is attached to all of these things. But the celebrities that come back, death fakers, that used to be a big topic. But I often wonder how much of that is noise. A lot of it could just be noise.
Right.
But so it's interesting. I'm pretty sure Nipsey Hussle didn't die. There's plenty to substantiate that. And he was, of course, his death was preceded by a music video where he appears. It's a music video. They call it the Die Young Curse. The song is called Die Young by like Roddy Ricch or something. And in the music video, Roddy, the rapper, is in a graveyard looking at Nipsey Hussle on his phone and rapping about how he doesn't want to die young. And it was at 1 minute and 33 seconds into the video. Well, that following March 31st was Nipsey Hussle's death date. And died at 33. So yeah, I mean, rappers apparently do it all the time.
And I guess this is still part of the celebrity world, but I'm now pivoting to the celebrity conspiracy, like conspiracy influencer world. Like, what do you think of the idea that certain quote unquote independent conspiracy influencers are actually placed there to steer narratives? And who are the most suspect ones right now, in your opinion? Like, I know that guy what's his name? The DTRH flat Earth guy. I know he's a shill, but
Okay. We'll start with that. So this is a good question because I know there are plants, but I've noticed too that these plants will have several people under them who are like
Mhm.
underlings. So, for example, Dearth. When
Dirt,
I
yeah,
was I was very early on in IPS, and he used to call me after the live streams, and he would say, "Don't say nobody died on 9/11. I saw the planes hit the building." He used to say this to me. He told me that he had his best friend has to see a psychiatrist because the body's hitting the ground traumatized her so much. So he used to attempt to shame me into not talking about these things, but he would never do it live. So he's always trying to gatekeep me. But beneath him, he had a number of other channels that were answerable to him, like he was some kind of boss. Like people like Jaren, people like
I see that a lot.
and what I determined though, here's what really struck me as a red flag, is that one of the individuals beneath him was platformed. He was made a speaker at a conference. He was given an interview with the Daily Beast. Well, unbeknownst to any of us, but known to Dearth and others, this guy was a predator on parole. And I thought, why are they putting a child predator in front of the Flat Earth Conference? It didn't make any sense to me. And when I called it out and somebody dug up his court records, we were attacked. Dearth even said to me, I actually have the tweet. He said, Swift thought she was 18. Can we just leave it behind? And I'm like, wow. So my point of it is this character, the parolee, I don't think that he was an agent like a Fed, but I do think he was a confidential informant and that he was working for a Fed. And what are they doing? They're controlling narratives. And this is a common theme. So I think, yes, I think there are plants, and a lot of the channels they may not even be at the top of this network. However, I think they do have agendas. And some of the agendas are keeping the conversation controlled within certain parameters. And that's where we get into this area of gatekeeping. And I think there's a ton of gatekeeping. I can name quite a few, but most of the ones that I would accuse of gatekeeping are maybe even just doing so because they're adhering to truth or orthodoxies. Like, for example, the people who don't know about media fakery, who think everything is a false flag, they're not all shills, but they might as well be because they're following the lead of the controlled opposition.
In your analysis of the quote unquote final experiment, you explored its perceived failures, What lessons can be drawn from this, and how should individuals approach similar large-scale projects and narratives in the future?
The final experiment should have gone down without a hitch. There's no reason why there should be any doubt at all. If I go camping and I come back, nobody's going to question, oh, he went out to the Jemez Mountains. Like, it's pretty self-evident. But for some reason, the way they delivered it, the way it was packaged, none of it came out as self-evident. And then if you're going to do science, you have to remove ego and personal bias from it. And you had a bunch of biased participants, and they were using this to essentially destroy a model of the flat earth that nobody really believes in. So I said they just spent a lot of money to go burn a straw man in Antarctica. The fact that they came in so hostile towards the flat earthers too also doesn't help the flat earth side trust their evidence. So I can understand why a lot of people are just doubting it. But I thought it was valuable because by examining this, we were able to discuss, well, what would it take to fake such a thing? And a lot of people became educated on these big LED sets, these virtual sets, the capabilities, because we have to know what are they capable of faking, so we can take that into our assessments every day. And could they fake a moon base? I would say yes, they have. They faked the moon landings. Could they fake a Mars base? Well, if they can fake these, why couldn't they fake a trip to Antarctica? So I would say it opened up a lot of interesting conversational threads. But as far as the experiment itself, I'm just rejecting it because I don't trust any of the participants. I think they're all compromised individuals. I mean, not to, I'm not judging, but Witsit Gets It has a lot of mugshots, a lot of domestic abuse. Witsit Spits It, if you've heard of that. And I'm just saying, okay, these individuals seem troubled and questionable. And
I've heard Jake the Ass will make the same kind of. Sorry to interrupt.
No, good point. Because I mean, if I was going to go down there and I had something terrible on my record, I wouldn't go. I would say, I don't want to go because this will be used against me. This will be used to discredit me. And so these individuals are self-discrediting. So why are they the ones going? So that was one of the errors also. Nobody trusts them.
Because, they muddy the waters with their, private past. And if they were serious about the truth, they would, self-disqualify just so that they don't muddy the same truth seeking that they claim to aspire to.
Sure. And Vapegate didn't help. The whole thing about did he fake the vape or not, because it got the conversation diverted to fakery. But I think I learned a lot from this whole thing. And one thing I didn't do is I refused to believe it right away. Like, they want to force you to believe it. Like, look at the screen like you're in Clockwork Orange with your eyes peeled back. They want you to just look at the screen and absorb it, download it. And I'm saying I don't work that way. If this is being presented as evidence that's going to fundamentally change my worldview, I need time to think about it. So anybody who just automatically went with it, that was not skeptical. Anybody who believed in it because Jaron got mad, not skeptical. I think we have to be skeptical, which means we have to take time. And they were trying to force people to accept it. And again, does this change my belief about the world? Well, not really. I don't consider the ball Earth model to be complete because we don't know what space is, because they've fabricated it with CGI and cartoons. So if we don't know what space is, then it would be premature to conclude that we know what the Earth is in all its finitude and it's this shape and this size. Like, no, I'm sorry, but I'm going to suspend judgment for years if I have to.
Lynn in the chat says, if we caught NASA lying and faking things outright, then who cares about the shape of the Earth, quote unquote? It's distraction. What do you say to that, Tim?
I would say the flat Earth as a quote movement has well established its efficacy for maintaining a large body of skeptics. And I'd say the skepticism is healthy. I'd rather have them skeptical of all media than automatically believing all media, because you can fine tune your skepticism. But if you're a non-skeptical, you're basically Truman in the Truman Show. So I'm actually a fan of the flat Earth movement, even though there isn't a flat Earth model. I think the body of people who identify with it or look into it or find value in it, who recognize that the flat Earth question is valuable, I think they are the free thinkers for the most part. They're not all Bible flat earthers attached to a model. That's actually a very small minority.
Right. Um. Okay. Yeah. Let me see. I think I skipped a question I wanted to ask you when you were talking about the latest shooter in the news, the Solomon kid. Uh, there was this one episode I was watching. I think it was the one titled "Burzum, Kanye, and Another Shooter with the Madness." That episode, you connected various cultural figures and events. Uh, can you explain the significance of these connections and what they reveal about societal narratives? Uh, like the Candace Owens that he was quoting, and you touched on that earlier.
Yes. Yeah, this is an interesting case because, again, Henderson Solomon, a black 17-year-old school shooter who
Mhm.
identified as a white nationalist,
That's
but
so
he was
strange.
it's an inversion. It's a weird paradox. Like, wait, it doesn't make sense, does it? But I was looking at Kanye West because in 2013 he put out a song called Black Skinhead. And
Hmm.
that song I looked at it when I was trying to determine his relationship with Marilyn Manson. I'm trying to figure out, like, what's this whole Donde thing, all these big rituals he's doing. So I'm looking at the song Black Skinhead because he goes on InfoWars wearing a black hood, and he's with Nick Fuentes, who's the leader of white nationalism, basically, as far as intellectual leadership. As pathetic as it is, it's Nick Fuentes. So I see these together and I'm like, okay, he's living out the character that he describes in the Black Skinhead song. Well, as time goes on, he puts out this album and he starts called, I think he samples a song from a black metal group called Burzum. He puts out an album called Vultures, inspired by Burzum's art. Now, Burzum is a black metal band whose singer is associated with anti-Semitism and a murder. So it's kind
Yes.
of a weird association for him to wear a Burzum shirt after he goes out with Candace Owens, wears a White Lives Matter shirt, and insults Jews. So if you remember that whole controversy, you had Candace Owens,
Right.
black, yay, black, wearing White Lives Matter, and White Lives Matter was a white nationalist thing. At least that's how the media sees it. So it's, again, the inversion. It again, it doesn't make sense. Like, this is really strange. So fast forward to this recent shooter. The first picture I see of him, he's wearing a Burzum shirt. My first thought, and I said this live, they're going to tie Ye into this. Well, it turns out that he actually mentions Kanye West in his manifesto by name. And he says death to the West. And here's what the big theme is, though. So the big theme and how it ties into even the madness, because the madness is about a billionaire, Musk, financing right-wing Nazis on the internet to radicalize people to violence. So this shooter, Henderson Solomon, is specifically someone who caught the madness. So he fits that perfectly. That's where it ties into this Netflix show. And then, of course, you see him doing the Nazi salute, which ties into Musk doing the Nazi salute. But then he mentions Ye and Candace Owens in his manifesto. And all these things make me say that he's probably fake. But what I wanted to point out was when I saw the first picture of him, I was able to say they're going to bring Ye into this. And I shouldn't be able to know that because I'm not psychic. But the reason I know is that when it's fake, every single detail is connected to what's following next, just like with the Stanley Kubrick film. Nothing's an accident. And the t-shirts, the haircuts, these things are all giveaways. And so in this case, that t-shirt was giving away part of the plot. And what is that plot? The plot is Helter Skelter, Turner Diaries, Race War, America falling because of race. In fact, when Kanye West did his event called Donde, where he runs into a burning house and it's his childhood house and he comes out on fire,
Hmm.
he says that's a reference to Martin Luther King, who said that he was afraid that desegregation was sending blacks back into a burning house, meaning the West is burning. You can't fix it. It can't be fixed. So in other words, it's apocalyptic in a way. So the shooter represents this doomsday Turner Diaries, Helter Skelter race war scenario that's going to tear America apart at the seams, like the whole 2020 thing with George Floyd and Derek Chauvin. So I'm
Right.
suggesting that the madness on Netflix is also, it all ties into this. It really does. It ties into class war, race war, and the elite versus the working class.
Hey Tim, you talked about deep fakes and AI generated personas blending into real life. How much of what we see in politics and media do you think is already like fake and synthetic and AI?
See, that's a good question because that meme coin girl, I think her name, I don't know her name, the one who the Hawk Tua girl.
Hakua? Yeah.
Oh,
She just disappeared after like her crypto thing like collapsed and then she
yes,
disappeared, lay low. That one, right?
she hyped up a meme coin, rug pulled it, and disappeared. And I started thinking to myself, from the very first time I saw her, she looked like an AI version of like Marjorie Taylor Greene. Like she's based off that character. She just
Mm.
seemed very inauthentic to me. And I'm thinking to myself, why would this get popularity? And a lot of people thought this. Now, I'm not saying she doesn't exist. However, the technology is such that if they wanted to invent a girl like that, make her go viral, create a meme coin, and then delete her, they certainly could. And if we look back, the deepfake technology, as far as CGI, maybe it's not that perfect yet. It's not that great yet. It's getting there. Maybe it can fool most people. But before this, they were already using older styles of deep faking, as in synthetic skin, hyper realistic masks. And this was a classified secret until like 2015. The director of disguise at the CIA, Jonah Mendez, did this series of interviews where she said that no, we have been using masks that are so realistic that they're foolproof. And they've been using those things for decades. So the truth of it is, we've been deep faked our entire lives and we have no idea. You would have to test it. And I would also argue here that this modern hype about digital deepfakes is a distraction from the fact that we're surrounded by deepfakes that are undetectable. And one of the points she made was she went into George W. Bush's, George Herbert Walker Bush, into his office with a mask on, and he thought it was his assistant. Like she
Wow.
literally fooled the president, and then she took the mask off. And in the photos of this unveiling, they actually blurred out the mask because the public wasn't supposed to know that they have synthetic masks that are that foolproof. So we've always been deep faked. There's no way of knowing.
I remember when, like 2 decades ago, when the Gulf War, the Desert Storm stuff against Saddam Hussein was all over the media right after 9/11. I remember them bringing up how Saddam Hussein had all these body doubles, and even recently, maybe a couple years back, that Patrick Bet David guy interviewed one of his surviving body doubles, and I recall reading in an Arabic publication, like way back in the day, like in the 90s, how Saddam Hussein was taught by his handlers, by his CIA handlers who helped him, make a coup and everything all the way back in the 70s. They taught him how to use but and how to recruit people who resembled him, train them and everything to be his body doubles. So, uh, but 20 years ago they were trying to make it seem like this exotic alien um, form of combat. Like, oh, this is something the Iraqis do. They have body doubles, but the reality is they were the ones who use these kind of tactics from the get-go, and they even created Saddam.
That's interesting. One of my favorite topics are the inflatable tanks of World War II. And more recently, inflatable tanks that the newspapers are like, look, we're tricking the Russians. And you have these big inflatable tanks. You have these wooden rocket launchers, all this deep fakery on the battlefield. And they say, oh, we're tricking the other guys. And I'm like, how dumb do they think the Russians are? Like, they don't read your newspapers. And what I realize here is that they'll show us the technology the other guys are using. But the truth of it is, there are no other guys. It's only the power structure and its mechanisms of mass deception against all of us. So Ukraine isn't using inflatable tanks to trick the Russians. We weren't using inflatable tanks. Americans weren't using these
World War
inflatables to
II.
trick the Nazis. They were tricking the cameras to trick the public.
Right. And when you look at images of these Nazi soldiers, they don't even really look like soldiers. They just look like models wearing fancy suits. Like, they try to make them, so scary. But to me, they don't have that look of ruthless killers. I don't know. uh, and speaking of kind of the same subject matter, Trump was talking about releasing redacted, or what do they call it when they have CIA redacted material on the assassinations of MLK Jr. and uh, JFK. Do you think that's just more of uh, the the George Floyd type script, causing divisions and bringing back the civil rights script? Because obviously the civil rights movement was also another uh, hoax from their end. It was just another thing for the cameras.
Now that's interesting. The civil rights movement started, I think, after Emmett Till, and someone had
Right.
suggested that Emmett Till may have been an early crisis actor who grew up and became MLK. I have to look into it. Wouldn't shock me, because these are all examples of atrocity propaganda, where they create a martyr, they create a scene, and they drive big narratives and movements based off of it. And these are not new techniques at all.
Mm.
It's just been perfected over time. But as far as this recent spate, like recently we've had Tyreek Hill. This is what I wanted to bring up. Tyreek Hill,
Right.
he's a football player for Miami Dolphins, and he was yanked out of his car rudely by these cops. And he's put on the ground. The cops are wearing these like really tall boots. They look like they got these motorcycle helmets, so they look scary, or they're meant to, and their language is pretty rough. And the interesting thing about it was 2 days before, Netflix had released a movie called Ruby Ridge, and the main character, whose name happens to be Terry, and Tyreek ties into like Tyrone Nichols, Tyree Nichols, the um, individual who was killed a few months before. The names are very consistent. Or they cloned Tyrone was a movie that had just come out, and they cloned Tyrone was actually going to star the guy who played in Ruby Ridge, who played Terry. So I'm looking at all these patterns here. But here's my point. Tyreek Hill gets yanked out of his car, and everybody was comparing it to what they just saw on Netflix, Ruby
Mhm.
Ridge, where this Terry guy gets beat up by cops and robbed. And like this is like it's one for one. Every single time there's a major Netflix movie that's trending, there's going to be a psyop attached to it right after. But this is nothing new. They used to drive these big stories with traditional media, and now they've just expanded, with social media and almost like target marketed psyops, where they probably even target it that way, where the people who are fans of Miami Dolphins are going to be getting inundated with advertisements for this movie. Like it's so perfect. The system is like it's an
Like a
immersive
demographic.
echo.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yes.
An immersive echo chamber, you're saying. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Do you think, hey Tim, do you think this term controlled demolition, which is, applied to 9/11 and all that, do you think we're seeing a controlled demolition of Western civilization itself with the fires and, uh, deportations and all that stuff, and just the tensions and the Nazism and the racism on social media, and like, do you think all of this is kind of uh, cooked
This
up
is good.
fuel?
Yeah, this is good, because this is what I mean when I say Metascript. The
Medicine.
Metascript we're living through, the big story is the death of the West. And I think the
Hmm.
story is told through metaphors, like the sinking of the Titanic, the
Hmm.
sinking of the Twin Towers. These are all things that are, I think, part of this bigger story, and they drive the same narrative. So the metaphor of like too big to fail, the Titanic sinking, this is a powerful metaphor, and they tied it into 9/11 in many different ways. I can compare. I mean, it gets pretty deep. Like James Cameron, who filmed the Titanic in 1997, you watch the Titanic, it
Right.
splits in two, and it sinks like Twin Towers, and people are jumping off of it. Well, on 9/11, James Cameron was at the site of the sunken Titanic, filming a documentary called Ghosts in the Abyss. Now, the significance is that he's at the site of the sunken Titanic, predicted it in his movie on the day of 9/11, which symbolically is the sinking of the West, where looking at this metaphor. And the continued metaphor goes on. We look at that recent movie Megalopolis, Francis Ford Coppola,
Mhm.
about America falling. It's about the fall of the Roman Empire. Megalopolis, Rome, great again. And he says it's about the fall of Rome. So you have Gladiator 2 about the fall of Rome. So they're communicating to us in big psyops this gradual story of the West falling in such a way that to future history books, it's all going to make sense. This is why it fell. This was the story. This is what drove it. So they're going to look at Musk as a symptom. I was listening to a left-wing liberal podcast today where they said that Musk is an example of why we can't have billionaires, that billionaires destroy entire systems. So he's destroying cyberspace and low Earth orbit. And he's using low Earth orbit, cluttering it with his Starlink, but he's using it to do what? To spread misinformation through the internet. So he's an example of why we can't have a system, a political economic system that allows individuals to amass great power and wealth at the expense of everybody else. And then you add to it the disproportionate effect that America has on the globe with the whole climate change model. And now you have this whole excuse for getting rid of the West. And this podcast I'm listening to, because I'm always listening to the extremes on each side. This is from the Daily Beast, one of their podcasts, and they suggested that we're entering the place now where the global community needs to put its interests above that of America. Like America is a rich individual, and the collective wants things to be leveled out. And so America needs to fall. You know, it's essentially this long-term scripted story, and we're living through it. So I agree with your premise there. And my whole take on Kanye West, White Lives Matter,
Mhm.
and that tie-in there, it further I think underscores this, because what Ye represented with the Kardashians was the epitome of Western decadence. So
Right.
Ye's family falling because of Hollywood and porn, and he loses his billionaire status. He loses everything. We were watching in 2022 the fall of Kanye West. And I think that was symbolizing the fall of the West, collapsing under the weight of its own depravity. And I think that story's been continued. That's why the shooter who referenced Ye said death to the West. And that's what the CEO shooter's message is, death to the West, because it's this political economic system that enables these rich people to exploit everybody else.
Wow. Okay, now I want to move over to something you've covered recently, and I've heard you talk about it in the past as well. You've hinted that the Mandela effect might be more than just misremembering. Like, have there been any recent examples that suggest reality itself is, being manipulated? Like, Mandela effect is not the right term.
Yeah, here's what I kind of have like this bridge between, because I would argue that the Mandela effect is 100% the misinformation effect. It's a
Oh,
manipulation. And the
right.
thing is that people confuse it with authentic synchronicity. And synchronicity and Mandela effects are not the same thing, but they fall into the same box because like these are unknown phenomenon you can't explain, and it seems like reality is glitchy. And I understand why people attach themselves to the Mandela effect as something mystical. It's a false miracle. But for the people who are into this, they may also be more familiar with these other ideas. So I have long entertained the idea that synchronicity is evidence that we live in some sort of a cybernetic system where our thoughts do, in fact, communicate to the wider universe, that there is a interrelationship. And I'm not saying that beliefs create reality. I'm not saying it's that simple, but I would argue that we do have some level of agency that extends beyond what our meat suit can do. And a lot of these things get lumped into paranormal and psychic, but I think it's useful to look at it based on evidence and experiences. And in my experience, our focused intention has quite a lot to do with what we would term synchronistic events. There's some sort of, I don't know if you call it probability manipulation. People say
Hmm.
law of attraction, which kind of oversimplifies it, but it's leading in the right direction. And I focus on this topic sometimes because we're trying to figure out what the deal is with the mass media always trying to gain our attention, the attention economy. Why do they want our focus? And then you look at the occult underpinnings, the magical symbolism around their rituals, how sometimes they're celebrities, especially in Super Bowls. I mean, we should talk about those. The Super Bowl
And
ceremonies are often just laden with occult symbolism. Well, if you look at the theory behind magic and how it's practiced and various schools of thought on it, it's all about concentrating your intent on some kind of symbolic representative of what you're trying to tap into or manifest. So it seems to me that whether we want to be or not, collectively, we're being dragged into some type of involvement with some type of, I would say, ritual. And it's not just to get your money or your vote. We're plugged in to the system at a soul level. And I don't know exactly how it all works, but I think the understanding of what synchronicity is might be a key to understanding why they want your intention so bad. Your attention is like their main resource.
was it you who said Trump is a great magician? I think it was you.
Actually, it was
Like,
Marina Abramovich said it first, but I've
oh, okay.
reiterated that. I said what he did on 7/13 was an excellent magic trick, because
Yeah.
that was when 7/13 was not a false flag. It was not a second shooter. It was a magic show, and he is a magician by all definition. I mean, most
He's a wizard,
psyop
yeah.
actors are seen after the fact. It's pre-recorded. This was done live during a speech. He did a magic trick. I mean, Donald Trump should be in the Hall of Fame for magicians. I know he's in the Hall of Fame for World Wrestling Entertainment, but no exaggeration, he pulled that off. They pulled it off. And you know, the Secret Service had to have been a part of it. And one more thing, you mentioned the JFK files. 2 months before the JFK assassination, he and Jackie and the Secret Service made a spy movie that hasn't been released to the public yet, where they fake killed JFK and they use Heinz 57 ketchup for blood. Yeah. I don't know why that hasn't been released. To me, that's more interesting than theories about who did it. It's like, why was JFK and his wife faking his death 2 months before? And why hasn't that been released to the public? Vanity Fair did a story on it. I saw some still shots being in the mood for the big hoax.
They do that so much though, huh? Like they have drills before the actual quote unquote war, uh, drills before the actual quote unquote, you know, big C event, and then now this JFK scripted scenes before the actual assassination. They always do that kind of stuff. It's so weird.
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking today, you know, on 9/11, there was a scheduled drill that involved planes as weapons. There
Mhm.
were just so many drills. There's one specific drill, I think it's called Operation Tripod, where they had more than 1,000 mass casualty actors. And this is a consistent thing. The drill's happening alongside the real event. There was a recent, these nurses doing a drill just went into action. In, let's see, the Christchurch shooter, he was caught by these police officers who were doing a drill for running cars off the road to apprehend somebody. You know how they caught him? They ran him off the road because they were already dressed for the occasion. So there's this. So we talk about the synchronization between entertainment and the fake news. Well, we also need to talk about the synchronization between drills and the fake news events, because those are also a consistent indicator of it being a hoax.
Yeah. If I hear a drill, I'm already my ears perk up now. So, yeah, moving on, Tim, there's been an increase in UFO and alien narratives. Again, like when I was a kid, it was a big part of mainstream media. You know, the aliens and ET and UFO abductions and all that. It's back. Do you think this is just another Cold War style distraction, or there are deeper agendas?
It has to be, I think it has to be a deeper agenda, because
Yeah.
there was a lull in activity. I remember commenting on this when I first started
Mm.
this channel. I said, look, it's 2017, 2018, everybody's got a phone, and we're not seeing any UFO videos. Now that
Yeah,
everybody has a phone, we should see more of these things. And in fact, the inverse was true. And then the flat Earth movement happened. Nobody in the flat Earth movement believes in aliens. And then all of a sudden, the final experiment's being planned, and then UFO sightings start peaking. And then the drone invasion over New Jersey, which all of those were discredited. All the drone sightings were airplanes. But there's a reason why it's being hyped, for sure. They're setting the stage for something. And I thought it's interesting timing that they want to shut down the flat Earth topic right now. Like maybe they're getting ready for aliens, and they want to make sure that nobody is going to be a big doubter of it. And it would make sense because the only people who would automatically call it a hoax would be, the flat Earth group. But yeah, it seems like they're setting something up. The whole alien thing, space wars, space junk. Now, I'm just not sure if it involves aliens or illegal aliens. Like, in other words, another country, like Chinese drones or something. But
right.
the saturation, you're right on that. Your instincts are right. They saturate us with it, they're going to hit us with it.
Remember, I think this is what now 2 weeks ago, the whole New Jersey sightings of all these drones and stuff. Like that's kind of what we're talking about. The UFO resaturating the medium mindscape with all that stuff, and there has to be something big coming. uh,
Well, what they do, and this is formulaic, is before a big event, they have to give you stuff in your imagination so that you can conceptualize it. So for about space junk 5 years ago, well, now space junk is regularly reported on. They divert flights, but they put out movies like Moonfall, which has stuff falling from the sky, and your subconscious processes all this information and stores it in your memory banks, but you don't have a separate memory for fake stuff. And I would suggest that if the recency is a huge part of it, the more recent you've been hit with it, the more effective you're going to be. They're going to be more effective in their brainwashing because it's in your mind at that moment. And right now, yeah, we're at peak saturation for UFOs. So I'm thinking this is, and also the drone thing. You saw that in New Jersey. Why was there a panic about drone invasions when nobody was actually seeing anything? So that says too that people are ready to be panicked. I think they're ready to believe. I think they're just testing the waters.
Now, I have a question. I asked Silas and Armin this as well. I basically anyone who's into this kind of subject matter, I asked them this question, and it is, what's with their esoteric, bizarre symbolism that keeps showing up in mainstream events, and like the obvious occult and esoteric references, the one eye symbology, the numerology 33. I think you don't really believe in gematria, but why do they do that in your opinion? What's the agenda
Sure.
behind that?
Well, one thing on gematria, it's not that I don't believe in it, but rather I think it's misused when people try to make predictions based on it when they veer into this realm of what you call the sharpshooter fallacy, where they're able to make anything fit. But it's a fact that the mystery schools do make use of ciphers. They encrypt things, and gematria is one way to encrypt things. And within the context of magic, and this is all in their books, Magic in Theory and Practice, that words have like, okay, thoughts are things, and the written expression of a thought or a word, and every letter is a symbol, has a certain meaning to it that remains intact, even if it's scrambled, if it's backwards, or if it's converted into a sigil that no longer represents its original statement. And this whole premise of symbolism that involves encoding things is that it's bypassing the conscious awareness, and the subconscious interprets it. This is the theory behind sigil magic, that everything that you're seeing, that you're perceiving, you do process, it does go into your mind, even though your consciousness can only selectively focus on its immediate needs, the now. So your consciousness is an aperture. It filters out more than, because if you were to be aware of everything you were perceiving, it would be like acid. You'd go crazy. You wouldn't have a coherent experience. But that doesn't mean that all that noise goes nowhere. And my point is, the theory behind magic is that it works by bypassing your conscious awareness. So when they put this stuff in our faces, it's because they're bypassing your conscious awareness. They're just downloading it into your head. And what is it? Well, it appears to be the case, and I alluded to this earlier, that the people who run this place are indeed apprised of what I consider a technology, an understanding of magic, and how you communicate to the person at an energetic level, how you engage them. And I'm not sure the end result of this. I know it's psychic entrainment, but there may be something more. It may be sinister even. But what I know for sure is that the reason why they put the stuff out there is for you to see it and not see it. And the reason why you can see it yet not see it is because you are not initiated. You're profane. And until you've been shown the initiated interpretation, you're not going to be able to process it. It'll just bypass your awareness.
So, for example, when Trump starts talking about Greenland and stuff like that, he is giving you loosh, but there's also a hidden esoteric aspect to it that, you know, the initiates know. They probably know something about Greenland that the average Joe doesn't. That kind of thing, right?
I would say so, because I've been able to, and this is just by making observations and noticing patterns, I've been able to deduce certain, I would say, meanings. For example, the number 33 is consistently associated with psyops that create this problem reaction solution. You know, create some chaos, wait for the reaction, and then deliver the order. So order out of chaos is the logo, is the slogan of the 33rd degree of the Masonic cult. And so it's fitting and it makes sense. But whenever we see that number, it's just so conspicuous. Well, then I noticed too, the number 42 and how it's consistently associated with the race war psyops. Or the number 119, 911, 611. These things are all code. 611, since this has been for many years, is associated with domestic violent extremists, whereas 9/11 is like the external terrorist. But 6/11 goes so deep because, like, Trump was shot, for example, at 6:11 p.m. Timothy McVeigh was executed 6/11. Even the inverse. So in the Batman universe, 11/6, Gotham underwater. It's also associated with the nuke. Oppenheimer, the movie, 11 miles long, IMAX film, 600 pounds. Oppenheimer wears the K6 or 11/6 badge. So there's a consistency. Tim Ballard, Sound of Freedom, he carried that Bible verse, Tim 6:11. These numbers seem to be associated with certain genres of psyop. There seems to be a consistency here. So I would say that a lot of the numbers and stuff we see could represent some kind of internal code that we're not meant to notice. Where in fact, if you notice it, they call you crazy. They say you have apophenia. And I'm like, well, no, I've been following this enough that we can predict it. And it became a joke here. Well, like, hey, guess how old the shooter was? Guess how many bullets he fired? And people always get it right. And that shouldn't happen in the real world, but it happens all the time through the mediated version of events.
Okay, I had this question I wanted to ask early on, but I'm just going to ask you now. You talked about how NASA and space agencies are part of the illusion machine. Like, what's your take on their latest announcement? And what do you think, you know, what are they really covering up? Same with SpaceX and Musk.
Yeah, that's a good question, because what I know for sure, for example, is that there's a lot of fakery involved. The space station's not real. And this gets me to question a lot of things. Orbiting satellites. So then what is the purpose of it? Well, one, as a unifier, the concept of heaven unifies mankind. And this has been a concept since even before they put anybody on the moon. The Russian rocket scientists had this thing called, look it up, it's called Russian cosmism. And it's this idea of outer space as kind of a new heaven. It represents where man's going to evolve into becoming a multi-planetary species. That's where Elon Musk got it from. He got it from the Russian cosmism school of thought. But the idea of space as a heaven, as and a unifier, is not new. And I think that is the purpose. But what is up there, I don't know. But I think what is for sure is that our ignorance is our prison. And as long as we believe that this is the world as they've defined it, and everything out there is just emptiness for an impossible distance, so there's nowhere to go, then we're effectively quarantined on what could be either a region on a much larger surface or something else altogether. But whatever it is, I look at space as ignorance, that the space program is literally about controlling the space between our ears. It's about creating a worldview. And I know the worldview is false because space is hoaxed. So I'm left with a lot of questions. I don't have answers, but the space program's primary objective is worldview warfare. It's keeping your worldview intact. That's why they showed you the face of the earth. This is your home. This is your cell. This is where you are.
And in your opinion, it's really all about that, right? The mind wars, like everything they do is just so that they control your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And by controlling our mind, I mean keeping our consciousness terrestrial, keeping us in this narrow band. And I would even argue that behind the political utility of controlling our minds, there is a spiritual side to it. NASA has all the trappings of a mystery school. Like I have made the point that the rocket is actually just a stylized obelisk, that its primary purpose is pageantry and veneration of the earth god. That the idea that it's flying somewhere, no, that's the exoteric lie. The truth of it is it represents the god Osiris. And space travel, ascension into space, I think that's all metaphor for ascending higher states of consciousness. You know how fast you have to go to leave the earth? Mach 33. How many engines does Musk's Starship have? 33. 33 stories tall. Well, 33 represents the vertebrae and the ascension of consciousness up the spine from the kingdom or the root to the crown. And so I think that the space program contains, like all the mystery schools, an esoteric side. And I think that the esoteric side is that space travel is at best an allegory for higher states of consciousness, but its practical utility is worldview warfare and keeping mankind in a collective Truman Show.
Okay. Well, Tim, I am out of questions. I've asked you all the questions I wanted to ask. If there's anything in the chat that let's see if there's any questions for you in the chat. Psy Girl, that's Lynn, she says, we will only see live stunt actors now, like Evil Knievel or Mad Mike Hughes. We get, quote, reality TV simulated stunts, but no more fancy, expensive movie sets. They can digitally fabricate it. You knew Mad Mike Hughes, right?
Yes. Mad Mike Hughes came across our channel because he saw our billboard and he wanted to collaborate with us. He said, hey, if you can finance my next rocket, I'll put your message on it. And so the IPS financed his launch, which is it's on Amazon. It's called Rocket Man.
Okay. And guys in the chat, you have any questions for Tim? I'm just scrolling through the comments, seeing if there's any questions.
Yeah, you know what I'm trying to do here with Infinite Plane Society and this think tank is we're trying to arrive at the best understanding of what we're all confronting. And I think there's just been a lot of entrenched ideas that need to be challenged. So when I challenge the Mandela effect or simulation theory, it's not that I'm challenging the believers in those as individuals. Like it's not like they're bad or they're wrong because of it, but rather I would ask them to consider the more mundane and satisfactory explanation as what I provided, that the power elite write the history in advance and synchronize entertainment with news. And I think that with any of these topics, debate and discussion is key to learning anything. And I've learned a lot over the last few years just by talking to people all the time and sharing research. So I appreciate you having me on and, crossing our audiences, because,
Likewise.
it's just, this is how we, I think, expand our minds and our understanding. Yep.
Uki says, when is the next Auto Hoax Con? That was a pretty cool event that you arranged.
Well, I want to do the next one live in person, and I'm planning for May. I wanted to do May so that we can talk about June, which is going to be a huge month. But I'm planning to do one in May. There may be one more virtual one in between then, maybe next month. But maybe next month, so I can see how many speakers I'll have for May, and then I can figure out what it's going to take to bring them here. But I want to have the first Auto Hoax convention, meaning all of our speakers are coming from the same place. Whatever topics we're on, we're coming from the same understanding. I don't want to bring back the same old, chemtrails, deep state, all these old tired narratives. I just want to have like the new crop of media skeptics represented, and having a convention is a great way to solidify what we have here, which is, I think we're a third branch. You've got mainstream, then you've got alternative media, but our level of criticism that even criticizes alternative is functionally a third branch. And I want to, build on that.
Lynn made a really salient point here. She says, Hollywood is over, a relic and a memory. It's fantastic, and I agree. Who could have predicted it? The LA fires are the funeral pyre. Diana, I think we went through over the Mandela.
Fascinating. What's ironic about that?
Go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead.
we did. You said Hollywood. There was there was a video that went viral of the Hollywood sign burning, and people said it's a sign. Look, a sign from the universe. Hollywood's going down. And then a few days later, a bunch of TikTok accounts are bewildered because they're looking at the Hollywood sign and it's untouched. So they're like, wow, they're having cognitive dissonance because they're realizing that what they experienced at home on TV didn't match what was happening in the real world. And if we're not able to leave our homes and fact check things, they can convince you your neighborhood burned down. And I think that's the objective, because if they can keep you home and plugged in, focused on your screen, then you'll believe climate change, alien invasions, and whatever else they say.
Final question for you, Tim. This is from Socrates. He's asking, you mentioned a lot about a grand deception, which is very interesting. Do you have an antithesis worldview to all this deception? And I think that's basically what. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
I was going to say that's what things like the Auto Hoax Con would be for.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Because there is no platform for media skepticism, looking at media as a monolith, because all the skepticism is internal, left versus right, right versus left, alternative versus left and right. But there isn't a platform outside of the box. So there really isn't an antithesis. You have the programmed and the programmers. So what we represent are the deprogrammed. And you can't claim to be deprogrammed if you're still falling for psyops or fake narratives. So the answer here is, as you said, Auto Hoax Con, we have to consolidate on this basis. And I think that is the only way we can achieve what I consider to be a deprogramming.
Well said, Tim. Well, I think we've covered everything. We've talked in a deep diving manner on things like media manipulation, staged realities, even AI. And what I like about Tim is you always expect, hard-hitting analysis. He's really good with coming up with abstract, vocabulary for abstract ideas. So I listen to him really for that more than anything. And I hope we have more interviews in the future. Thank you so much, Tim. Where can our listeners find you?
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I appreciate the time and effort you put into your questions, sending them to me in advance. This is how you create an info, dense environment. I appreciate your effort here.
Thank you.
And this is the second time I've been on here. This has been great. Doing this again. Anybody who wants to follow me, just go to infiniteplainsociety.com, or I made it really easy, ips.monster. So
Right.
ips.monster, which is a reference to our future plan. But the IPS think tank, you can go to ips.monster, you get the newsletter, live stream
Right.
notifications, and video archives. So in fact, I'll be on my own channel. So thanks for having me on, and thanks everyone for your comments.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Tim. And I'm just going to let Tim go. And just final thoughts. I am basically pivoting to interviews, highbrow interviews with highbrow guests like Tim. We had Silas and Armin on yesterday. Go check out our presentation on the Egyptology hoax. Uh, I wanted to. I looked back to that presentation. The one thing I forgot was showing the Nubian pyramids, how um, how pristine they look, and how laughable the claim that they're thousands of years old is. Right. So go check that out. IPS.monster. You'll find Tim Osman's Infinite Plane Society newsletter. Uh, his YouTube channels, Infinite Plane Society, Infinite Plane Radio. He's basically a call-in live stream, so people call in, and uh, I think he's great. Like and subscribe. Thank you. Thank you, Marcel, for sharing. Lynn, he was good in Videodrome. Remains of Egyptian dinosaurs. Uh, do they have dinosaur remains in the Sahara? James Woods is playing a huge role with the LA fires, and no, that's from the Shahpur Plate. The Shahpur Plate is, yeah, you're close. It's from the Sassanid Persian era. I totally agree. My take is every society have their dragon myth story, and the dinosaur is just our dragon myth story. I'm not a movie guy, really. Dinosaur was a Rockefeller Foundation myth created by Standard Oil, Sinclair Oil, and Dino the dinosaur. You know what? That's an interesting subject matter to deep dive into. The fossil fuel uh, story, petroleum, uh, the Persian Gulf, the oil boom, the petrodollar. All of that stuff is, uh, you know, me being someone who was born in Saudi Arabia. I think that's kind of a subject matter that hits close to home. But anyways, guys, I'm ending the stream. Thank you so much for tuning in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.